Welcome to the newest episode of Saved by the Books, where two ladies with opposite reading tastes discuss all things reading.
Hey guys, what's up? And welcome to another episode of Saved by the Books, our third episode actually. So yeah, Paige and Becky are back, and this week we're gonna dial back a little bit. Last week we talked about
how we do readathons.
Yeah, we talked about like readathons and managing readathons and all that fun stuff, because we're doing a readathon right now, technically.
Yeah.
We're recording this prior, but whatever. We're gonna pretend like podcast magic is happening and we're in the future.
Yes.
So anyway, this week we wanted to talk about how we got started with reading and why this podcast might be a little bit more interesting than you might have thought, because we actually have pretty separate reading tastes.
Yes, we're almost complete opposites when it comes to reading, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, so we obviously mentioned it a little bit for the first episode, but this time we're gonna go a little bit deeper into it. So yeah, we thought we would start with how we got started with reading.
Yeah, so figured, because not everyone starts the same. So I think both of us, this is one thing we do have in common, got started reading as little kids. I know for me, it was always, I remember going to the libraries on the weekends in the summer and being able to pick out whatever books, and my parents just really pushed the whole reading aspect in our house.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I probably started in kindergarten or before. Mom, if you're listening, let me know when I started reading, because I know,
I just always read. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
It was just we just did. It was one of those, I don't know,
but like, with my family, my mom likes reading, but like, my dad never read any books and my brother doesn't read at all. And like, my mom likes to read, but she does not read as much as I do, most of the time. So yeah, it was a little bit of an oddball, but it wasn't like discouraged or anything.
Right. And see, in mine, I have two younger brothers, and they both read like what typical boys would read, and then both my parents would read. I remember in the summers, that's when my parents would do the most reading.
Yeah.
And because they just live, I mean, they both have crazy schedules. And then whenever we did family vacations, that was the thing. We always had to go and get a book before a family vacation.
Yeah.
That was part of our thing. So
my parents would take me to the library like pretty much every weekend, and I pretty much checked out like the max amount of books. And usually like I knew I could ask my mom. We lived out in the country, so like there was nothing but Walmart.
And I promise you, it really is the country. Like, you may have heard, that's where I teach now. So
yeah, so she teaches in the same county that I went to school in growing up. But yeah, so yeah, Walmart was pretty much the only store. But like, if I asked my mom to pick something up, like a book up from Walmart, then she would get it for me. So she pretty much never said no. I can't remember a time that she said no. So yeah, like, it was encouraged, but I was still kind of the oddball.
Yeah, and I would still say, I know both of my brothers, I mean, they still read, and a lot of theirs are more the nonfiction type of stuff right now. And I'm definitely the oddball in the house that I'm known to always have a book on me. And where it's just, and I've also started the whole tradition, because I have nephews, like Christmas Eve, I took up that whole Icelandic tradition about giving everyone a book on Christmas Eve.
I tried that this past year. It didn't work.
And so that's the thing. It's like, it's known, they know, like, I'll take them to the bookstore or any of that. So I really push it, because I just remember that was just such a great, I don't know, I'm just a book fan, which obviously, clearly, since we're doing this podcast.
I feel like, I'm trying to remember if I like bought my niece some books before she was born. I feel like I did. Maybe I think I did. Maybe I just thought about it a lot, which is also possible. But no, I tried to start that whole like Icelandic tradition with Cody this past year. And Cody's my husband, if you guys don't know. But what ends up happening is that we tend to buy each other not a ton of presents, but like we both try to be Santa for each other. And so we don't like, we feel awkward if like we're opening a whole bunch of gifts and like nobody, like everybody else just has like one or two. So yeah, like we always open our gifts early. And so like what ends up happening is that I'm like, let's do this new tradition where we like open a book every year for whatever for Christmas Eve. And he's just like, let's just open all of our presents.
Yeah, why not?
But he did get me like 10 different books this year, which was nice. So
yeah. And then also going back, I think compared to now, I used to reread all my books.
Yeah,
like,
I reread everything, which like I feel like I want to get back to that in some ways, because like I definitely like when I was a kid, like I owned all of my favorite books, and so I reread them all the time. And pretty much the only books that I would like, I mean, like I said, my mom would buy me some books, but like for the most part I read from the library. And I would just reread. Like there was inevitably times where like I had finished all my books from the library, and so I would reread a book.
Yeah. And see, I was always, because I did not live out in the country.
And I thrifted more.
And see, we never did. Like I only started thrifting the last few years with you.
Yeah, but well, because like even way back in the day, I remember my library was they would do like the whole like
the book sales,
like the little book sales, and it was 10 cents a book, which is amazing. And so that's how I got like all of my Sweet Valley High books, which I then got rid of, and I could literally kick my past self for this.
Well, I mean, we would always do the library book sales, and I think there's also a neighborhood near me that would always do the massive garage sales. And so, and then when there was garage sales like in the neighborhood I grew up in, I mean, we would go and I could get books that way. But I was always, and I'm still to this day, I'm not a big, I like new books. It's such a bad.
I know, and I feel so bad. Like we went to the library book sale last year, which it's coming up soon. I know. So I'm gonna be going back. But at the same time, like a lot of those books I ended up unhauling.
And I haven't read, I don't know if I've read any of those. And so then we're like, why go back if we're...
But we're going back.
And then, I know...
Though I do still use my Amazon cashback. So my credit cards, both, I have 2 different credit cards, both for different purposes. And whenever those get, like as I spend, they get points. And so I use my Amazon cashback. So like, I mean... Theoretically, it's really not spending money. Cody and I disagree on this. No, I use it for other stuff too.
I know, but like, you do use it primarily for books.
I do, but like, I literally, like, I've actually looked into it. I literally can't like use that money any other way but on Amazon.
Right.
So like I buy stuff that I like can buy on Amazon. Like, you know, I've like looked up like clothes and like I try to like buy like new shoes, anything like that that's like extra I try to buy on Amazon, but most of the time it's books. So
but yeah, so I was gonna say, so what were some of your favorite, back on track, what were some of your favorite like childhood books? Like I know for me, like the original was like Amelia Bedelia. And because I just loved her and thought she was hilarious because she would always mix up stuff and was...
I feel like I read 1 or 2 of those. Is there more than 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a bunch.
I thought so, but I wasn't like... So...
That was the one that I remember way back when as a little kid.
So okay, so even to this day I'm like this. If there's a female protagonist, I will likely read it. But like... so like Sweet Valley High, like I mentioned, Babysitter's Club, which those are 2 that we do like overlap on. So like we kind of have opposite reading tastes in that I tend to like more of like the darker, like fantasy, supernatural, paranormal, thriller, like anything that's kind of like dark, or she's more like
the contemporary, the fluff, all that. And so like I know,
which
I mean, and that's what's funny because I mean, if you know, I mean, just because of your shop, like your style is mainly the darker stuff. And like, it truly influences your life. And I'm more the fluffy, like, hearts and flowers, and it's just complete opposite.
But at the same time, like, here's the thing. I read a lot, like now today, I'll read a lot of like Kindle Unlimited romance, and I will specifically read stuff with like werewolves and vampires and stuff, but I want it to be like fluffy goodness, but I want it to just have the added fact of like, oh, they can do magic, or oh, they can turn into wolves, because, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, like we kind of overlap in that way.
And I think we do, like, so, yeah, like as teenagers, it was Sweet Valley High, Babysitter's Club, Princess Diaries, but then I also read like Gossip Girl. So before,
yeah, no, I never read Gossip Girl, but I do like the show.
Yes, and then like I also did.
Bagley, I hate him. Oh, I hate him so much. I can't even watch you. I can't watch it. I literally tried. I watched it for like maybe 3 whole minutes, and I was like, I can't listen to this man's voice for another minute.
No more XOXO. And then I did Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and then anything, it was really those
See, and I read all those, but they weren't my favorite.
Right.
It was those were kind of the things I would read because I couldn't find whatever else up to read.
Right.
So, yeah.
Because, they didn't have much of that fantasy or the...
Yeah.
I mean, all you had was Goosebumps, which I would not
And
touch.
I read Goosebumps.
Yeah.
I loved the American Girl books. I loved historical fiction.
That's why I did do American Girl. Yeah. That was the one. And I think that's, like, even to this day, I mean, I love social studies and history type stuff.
And even, like Lois Duncan, she's the one who wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer. And so I like found her books. I didn't even know that's what she was like, I don't know, famous for. But yeah, so like I loved her books. And I still can't believe that those were in a school, because one of them is literally called Killing Mr. Griffin. And it's like about killing a teacher. So I'm like, wow. And I found those in my elementary school library.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like our school, we don't even have Goosebumps because of some of the stuff, which I find...
That's insane.
I know. I do find that. Now his other series,
Fear Street. Yeah. Oh, those were good, because they were like the darker Sweet Valley High. Like literally, it was like...
See, I never would, and I wouldn't read those. Even to this day, I probably wouldn't read them.
Oh, they're so good. I know. I also, back in the day, I remember reading a John Grisham, and I actually liked it. But it wasn't...
the book my dad would always read, John Grisham.
Yeah, and it was like that's the thing, is that they were... Like, I was kind of into them, but they weren't really my thing. I remember I tried Laurel K. Hamilton, but like I said, this is the 90s and the early 2000s when I was trying these books, and all I had was Walmart. And so Walmart doesn't exactly stock book one of like a 30-book series. So yeah, it was hard for me to like get a hold of like the first books in those types of series. So yeah. That's when fan fiction came into play.
What I was gonna say, like in college, I know that's when...
But actually, we just totally skipped over Harry Potter. Because I read Harry Potter when I was a teenager.
Well, and I read... That was mainly college for me because of age difference.
Yeah,
it's not much, but it is.
We do have enough of an age difference where we kind of have different experiences. Yeah. So like I distinctly remember in 4th grade, people trying to convince me to read Harry Potter, and I would not read it. I would not read it.
Well, see, and I started reading it, I think it was after the first movie, or it was coming out, because I've always been a big believer in reading the book first.
Yeah.
There's only been like one case it hasn't, and that's actually a different story. But I remember my mom got like the first 3 books, I think, of Harry Potter from my youngest brother, because he is your age, and so, but he refused. He's like, I'm not reading this about witches or a wizard or any of that. And so when the movie started coming out and I was like, oh, this looks really good, I just took his copies.
So, yeah, so I would not read Harry Potter all through elementary school, all through, I was in 4th grade, when the first, book came out, I think.
Yeah, I was in high school, I think. So it wasn't a big, but...
Yeah, and, I mean, yeah, because it was in middle grade, so, I was the right age. I am the Harry Potter generation. Yeah, but, yeah, so, but no, people were trying to convince me to read it, and I wouldn't read it. I was really into, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which isn't a book, but it's a TV show, and I was really into Charmed. Literally, Buffy the Vampire Slayer used to come on Tuesdays. everyone in my school or everyone in my grade knew that I was watching it on Tuesday, so they would come in on Wednesday and ask me about it. And they would like ask me like my opinion and stuff about it. But yeah, so like I didn't want to read Harry Potter because it had like the magic and stuff, but it wasn't a female protagonist.
I was going to say, yeah, it was the male.
And so finally in 7th grade, I had like exhausted all of my resources in the books I wanted to read. And I had read a whole bunch of fan fiction for Buffy. I was like, I needed to find something new. And so I was like, all right, I'll give Harry Potter a try. I read the second one first.
Of course, because you're a Slytherin.
Because, well, that, and because...
I know we've had this conversation before.
She and I have talked about this before, but like, for me, if like the synopsis tells me the premise, I don't need to read the premise. Like, I'm good. Yeah. So like, I was like, okay, so the first one's about how he goes to Hogwarts and he goes
he gets a stone.
Yeah, and he gets the stone, whatever. Okay, so he gets the stone. And so like the second book sounded more interesting to me. There was a monster in the basement. So, you know, that's what I read first. And then the rest is history because then I got into Harry Potter fan fiction.
I was about to say.
And read that forever.
I was like, at that time, that's when I did like all the girly, like typical contemporary adult books. So
speaking of, there's this girly contemporary I read. I distinctly remember it because I read it in 10th grade. And the title of it is called The True Meaning of Cleavage.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
And I read it in 10th grade, and I was in homeroom with the honors English teacher for 10th grade, and she walked up to me and asked me what I was reading, and when I told her, the scandalized look on her face. I was about to say, I can't believe it. Yeah. But it wasn't like about boobs or anything, obviously. It was about like friendship and like growing apart and how to cope with that in high school and things like that.
So was that found in your library too?
No, I found that
I would die.
At that time I went to a different, for high school I moved in with my grandparents, and so it was like in a different town, and so.
But still small.
It's a small town.
Yeah.
But there was more out there than just Walmart. Thankfully.
But in college, that's where, when the Pride and Prejudice movie came out, I saw that living in Ireland, and then I had to read the book, and then Pride and Prejudice became my favorite book of all time. But that's also like, I read Jill Mansell, Emily Giffin, any of the Jane Greens. I got into Sophie Kinsella,
which I still haven't. I have
all the Confessions of a Shopaholic.
I know I have Finding Audrey on my shelf. I might have gotten rid of the Shopaholic just because it was one of those books that I thrifted, and it was kind of gross looking.
I was about to say, that's
like the white cover, and it had like some stains on it, and so I was like, ugh. But yeah, and like I read Twilight as it was coming out.
See, I didn't read Twilight until after I graduated. It was when the movie came out, and I read it, and then that's how I got into Twilight fan fiction. Like I'd discovered the whole world of fan fiction.
You guys know, if I liked Buffy, I was all over Twilight as it came out, and I got bullied for it, and then Twilight Mania happened, and people were all into it, and I was like, y'all can't bully me one minute and then get into this the next.
Well, and then that's how I read what would later become 50 Shades of Grey. Before, I read it as a fanfic. Like, I haven't read it as the book. I mean, I know it's a book, but it's that whole thing.
And then the Shadowhunters books, they started coming out. I read the first 3 as they came out, and then I read the 4th one because I want to say City of Fallen Angels came out even before. I think they were coming out like, no.
Wasn't it the Clockwork?
Well, she started releasing Clockwork Princess or whatever, Clockwork Prince, whatever the first one is. Clockwork Angel, maybe? I don't remember.
Anyway,
and I wasn't into that because it was, I mean, there's 2 very distinct series, and so I just didn't feel like reading it at the time, even though it was a historical, like it had everything I liked about it, but I just didn't feel like reading it. And so I read the 4th one, and then I got into college, and college happened.
Well, I was gonna say, with your nursing school and my master's, that's where I kind of took a break. Like, I would read some, and it was mainly because when I was finishing up my master's, I was teaching. So everything revolved around those first few years of teaching and stuff. But that's when I ended up co-teaching my 2nd year, and my co-teacher introduced me to like the historical romances. And so like Sarah McLean and Julia Quinn, who are two of my favorites, which I've met one of them and I can't wait till BookCon because Sarah McLean's gonna be there.
See, I need to find some good historical romance that's like before the Regency period.
Yeah, see, I can't do powdered wigs.
Yeah, that's
and
the
these
thing.
don't. They
Okay,
don't.
good, because I can't.
That would be like Lisa James
or,
and stuff. Like I just can't
have
do.
Have you watched the Versailles show on Netflix at all?
No, but I was gonna tell you.
Because it's awful. I mean,
so why would I watch it?
No, I mean the show's not awful. It's just like the style of the men. Because I just can't get into it. Like the hair is longer than the female.
Yeah, and that reminds me
not for
because me. I don't know how I got this book. It's called Glitter. And it
I have
yes, I think it was because of you, but it deals with modern day, and it was Book Outlet. And this is a total side, but it brought it up because they live at Versailles, and even though it's modern day, like they still have the dress, they have all of that, but glitter is actually the drug that they have that they all use. But anyways, I can't deal with that stuff either. But like Julia Quinn, she's gonna have the Netflix series with hers.
Yeah.
So
she's the one that has like the alphabet children, right? Like all the kids are in alphabet.
Yes.
Okay.
But no, isn't it alphabet or they're all? Yeah, they're alphabets. Yes, but those are really good. Like it's the Bridgerton series, and
I think I added
something
it to my
the Bridgertons. Yeah, it's really good. But that's what I basically read, and then that kind of brings us to now, because when we met. Yeah, that's when I think my reading really picked up.
I took a
hiatus.
6-year hiatus from reading. If I read, it was like fan fiction, and it was because with nursing school, like I just didn't have the time, and so like with fan fiction, I could just like read a little bit, and like I already knew the world, and I loved the characters.
And that's what I liked about it, because I would always have it on my phone. So like, when I was doing my master's right before I started teaching, I was working on my master's. By the way, an internship at a hospital.
Literally, before I met Becky, I would not admit that I read fan fiction to anybody.
Same.
Like she is the first person I ever.
And now we're telling the whole world basically.
And she mentioned. I think you mentioned it once, and I was like, oh.
I think it probably meant like I think it came up. But I was like, yeah. I've told some of my like real, not that you aren't real life friends, but those in the world
sitting next to each other.
But some of my, like when the whole 50 Shades thing came out, it's like, and some other teachers were reading it, and then I was like, hey, because they would read it on their Kindle, of course, but
because even Shadowhunters started as a Buffy, or not a Buffy fanfic, but a Harry Potter fanfic, and even like I feel like that, like with 50 Shades,
and I think that's what brought fanfic to like mainstream.
Alexa Dunn, I always say, I always try to like pronounce her name wrong. Anyway, she has a YouTube channel. She wrote Brightly Burning, which is
Anastasia.
No,
isn't it?
What book is it? It's Jane Eyre in Space.
That's right. It's
and so she has I follow her YouTube channel, and that's actually like why I read her book, because I'm not a huge sci-fi person at all. If there's any sci-fi, like it's really like I haven't read Illuminate yet because I'm just not into that at all. But anyway, so I read her book. It was pretty good. I liked it. But she just posted a video about fanfic authors and like who like this is actually this kind of segues into something else we wanted to talk about, but like a lot of the fantasy authors now wrote fanfic back in the day,
which makes sense,
and so it kind of was interesting because I kind of alluded to it at some point, I don't remember when, but I started writing when I was a little kid. I think in our first episode I mentioned that, because there was that writing question, ultimate book tag question. But yeah, so I started writing when I was a little kid because a lot of stuff wasn't coming out, and so I don't know, it was kind of cool. But anyway, so in her video she talked about how a lot of people don't mention that they read or wrote any kind of fan fiction just because it's still not.
And you just went into the young adult section.
It was all chick lit.
It was all mainly like the chick lit and the chit. Wow, I can't talk.
Chick
lit and like romance and like those contemporary high school fluffy type of stuff.
And like
so it makes sense for the whole fanfic, because there's, I mean, you have that whole other population, because I mean that just took away, unless you were into wilderness type stuff for guys.
Yeah, that's true, because there was like a lot. I remember like White Fang, which wasn't a YA book, but
Hatchet and that whole thing.
Where
the red fern grows.
Holes. Where the red fern. I'm trying to think.
Because I know even for my brothers, when they were in high school and stuff, they went towards like Tom Clancy and stuff, which is an adult author. I mean, they did that. Like my younger brother, like I said, was Paige's age now. Like when he was in middle school, elementary school, he did Lord of the Rings, which is a much advanced book for like someone in third, fourth
and
grade.
A lot of my friends read Lord of the Rings too. Because
I
was never into it.
There really isn't much compared to now, because I know for my
like great. It just makes my heart so happy.
Well, see now, like I know a lot of my students, because they
have so much to read and they just don't even know. They don't know.
But like I've picked up like the Mike, I think it's Lupica. There's he does all the sports based novels, and like so all my boys no, but that's the thing, is because our library or even my classroom library wouldn't have many. I mean, they were mainly like, I have Harry Potter, but no, not my boys. Some of my boys, they would not touch Harry Potter with a 10-foot pole, you know, or I know, but
how many faces can Paige make?
Right?
If you guys are listening and you're not watching this, there's some expressions going on.
But I mean, I was able to go and get a bunch of this like realistic fiction revolving sports, and they would read. This is like truly the first time, and they even would say they came to me, because I teach special ed, so and they were like, I've never finished a book. Like it was just a big thing for them. And I mean, what I teach them is because they struggle in reading.
And I love the accessibility of things now too. Like that kind of reminds me, because Cody has ADHD, and so all of his books are audiobooks, and like, I don't know, audiobooks were a thing, but I don't know.
They were so expensive, and they were the CDs, and so
I feel like we talk about how like we need a lot, we need more inclusion in literature.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've come so far.
We have
but
I mean,
I would say like the expansion of YA definitely helped me get back into reading. I got back into reading in 2016 when I actually found like a BookTube video, and I was like, oh, I don't even remember who it was. I was like, that book sounds interesting. And it was like Heartless by Marissa Meyer. And I was like, oh, I want to read that. So I read that. And then I read 3 Dark Crowns. And I read that. And I was like, that was like it.
Yeah.
Ever since then, I've been reading like a ton again.
Well, and that's the time around when we met.
Yeah. And so then, of course, I was like, you gotta read this.
Right. And I mean, that's when I was sick. I don't remember if I've mentioned that, but I was really sick at that time and I couldn't read. And so I went to a lot of like Kindle Unlimited type stuff, because I didn't have to, like, I had a huge, with what was going on, and we've talked about, we both have chronic migraines, and mine played a part in that, but I lost a lot of my short-term memory. So I wasn't able to read. I couldn't read words off of a page, any of that. And so I would do a lot of the Kindle ones, because with Kindle Unlimited, I mean, they're just, I mean, it's a story, but it's one of those fluffy romance type of stuff where you did not have to think through it.
Yeah, and with Kindle Unlimited, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like because I pay just like $10 a month for it, like, I don't know, I feel like it's easy to just like
skim
and not, like, I don't know, that sounds so bad, because like I've definitely put value on those books. In fact, in my like current writing project, that's going to be published on Kindle Unlimited.
No, and I mean, I really enjoy those books. There's a lot of times when I have some right now, I just need to get back to them, but like that's when I did that. And but then once we figured out what was going on and I could start actually taking in, like actually comprehend what I was reading, I mean, that's when we met, and I got back into I also didn't take it for granted that I could read, and so I pushed reading more in my classroom.
About that,
and I did a lot of, I mean, that's what it was, because I went 6 months where I could not actually read. I could not understand a paragraph when I was reading. I mean, and that's something that was really.
I've been there. Which my migraines aren't, a lot of mine aren't so bad that I can't comprehend words, but I have definitely had those migraines where like I've like read an entire paragraph. In fact, recently I was reading a book on Kindle Unlimited, and the book kind of needed some editing, I'll admit. The story was good, but the book needed some editing, and a paragraph was repeated like twice or 3 times, and so I was like, I think it was 3 times in fact, and it was a little excessive, and I was complaining about it to Cody, and I had a headache at the time, and he was like, "Are you sure you're not?"
I know, that's what I'd be like, "Are you sure, or was it your migraine?"
I'm like, I promise you. This
well, and I mean,
happening.
I'm glad I went through that, and because I can empathize with my students, and I understand their struggles a lot more. Not that I mean, could ever, but it gave me that because I truly could not understand what was in front of me. I could not process it. And so then once I came back, I started reading like crazy. I'm a huge book hoarder anyways. And so once we started getting back into it, like that's when like she would start recommending things. Cause I always read like historical fiction and those, you know, the historical romance ones and contemporaries. But then through our friendship, and there's a few others, we would start reading, and we then started the book club.
Yeah, which we talked about last week with the Creating a Co book club. When I opened my sticker shop in 2015. And in 2016, when I started getting back into reading, I started talking about the books I was reading in our Facebook group for the sticker shop. And so eventually it got to be where we were talking about books so much that I was just like, I guess we'll open a book club group too. And so,
and then in that, a few of us would have a group chat. And so we decided, we did a lot of buddy reads.
Yeah, last year was like the year of buddy reads. We read Philippa Gregory, which was amazing.
And I mean, I know 2 out of the 5 of us read all the Philippa Gregory. It was us 2. Now the others read quite a bit of them. Yeah. And but then the Shadowhunter series, I believe I'm the only one that failed at that challenge.
No, I think I'm the only one that finished all of them.
Right, but the other ones got way farther than I did. And so that's when I only got introduced to Shadowhunters last year. So, and that's one of the other things, like rereading, and I talked about this even with Twilight in our first episode, with rereading Shadowhunters. It was so interesting because the first one came out in 07, maybe 06, I think it was 07 though, and just like, not the quality, it's just like, the way people wrote in 07 is compared to now.
Yeah, is different from how people write now. And so it's like, I don't know, it's just interesting to like go back and read, like, not necessarily what was acceptable, but wait, did I say that right? Whatever.
What was like accepted back then compared to back now, compared to now. But I think that's also because there's so many more.
Which this is not. This is kind of segueing into TV, but I just watched season 2 of Sabrina, and I've been watching Legacies, which is a sequel kinda to Vampire Diaries and the originals, and I love how sexuality is presented in both of these series
because it's actually present. It's not like, where you have to hide it.
It's very fluid and just like, I love it so much. It makes me so happy every time I'm watching these shows.
Well, I think that, and that's why, like, even now we have that new genre emerging, you know, instead of just the YA, there's the new adult.
Yeah.
And so,
but see, and I remember when and I hope that New Adult expands even more, because
I think it will.
right now I feel like it's so much just like romance with a lot of sex thrown in, and like, and they just happen to be college age, and so I hope that it expands even more.
But I can see it expanding. I mean, if you think about the fantasy, because fantasy's now taken off, like,
yeah, and I feel like that is like, it does need to kind of separate, because like YA technically covers from like 13 to like 25, like that is a long range, and like as I'm over 25, but as somebody who is older, I could read a book about a 25-year-old or like a 24-year-old or even a 20-year-old, but reading about a 13-year-old is a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, and so like that gets into like what we currently like. So,
and like Sarah J Maas with like all of her stuff, a lot of people think her stuff should be adult.
And I've never read it.
Some of the content.
It's just one of those things. Like, I just never got into it.
I feel like that's a fantasy you would like, because
it probably
it's a retelling.
Right, and so going into that, like, I never read fantasy, period, up until this last year or two, because of her and because of some of the others. Like, I have never. Now, Game of Thrones, different story.
See, and that's the
and I've read all the Game of Thrones
She
books.
has read Game of Thrones, and yet I'm a fantasy fan, and I have not read Game of Thrones. I don't plan to read Game of Thrones.
Oh my gosh, I can't. I don't know how we're friends right now.
Barely, like, this is gonna go on a whole other rant. We'll have
talk about Game of Thrones.
Yeah, we'll
one
have
day,
a whole episode about Game of Thrones.
Like, I know, because like
she's a bit way bigger. It's so funny because she's like, I don't like fantasy. I'm like, you're a bigger fan of Game of Thrones than I am.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jon Snow, and like, I love the Hound, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna die with this season.
I do like the Hound. I do like the Hound.
Yeah, I never did. And I like Tyrion and Jaime Lannister and all this, and I'm just like,
oh yeah, I like watching it. It's just not one of my favorites.
Just like the character development, I guess.
But
anyway,
yeah,
so I've read fantasy now because of her, and I am enjoying most of them. It's not, like, I have so many books on my shelf because of her and because of Book Outlet. This is not sponsored by Book Outlet. But I'm like, I love, and so because of BookTube and all that, I feel like there's a huge influx of that.
Yeah, totally.
And so I enjoy being able to expand on, because a lot of my students now, that's what they read and that's what they like.
It's so great, because
and
when I was a kid, they did not read that.
But like, still, like, I still tend to go towards the contemporary, the historical. We both do historical fiction, but I'll go towards like historical romance, and like I read memoirs.
See, and
biographies.
I get in different moods.
Yeah.
So like, this is what I love about Kindle Unlimited, because it's so, since I pay $10 a month for however much I want to read, it's so easy for me to be like, I feel like reading about werewolves today. I feel like reading about historical romance today. I feel like reading about vampires, whatever. And so I just love it for that.
Well, and that's
reason.
when I just go to the bookstore, do Amazon Prime, and I'm like, hey,
I know. See,
I just do that. It is a huge problem. And then I do a lot of classics and chick lit, but like where you are more fantasy supernatural, unless it comes, I mean, there's occasionally you'll read contemporary.
Yeah, I read, and
but
actually, I'm very picky about my contemporary. I also don't tend to reread contemporary a lot, so a lot of times I don't buy it. I'll usually like get ebooks from the library. I'm trying to think of some good contemporary, but like I tend to like lean toward, like, I loved Fangirl because I related to Kath so much.
Yeah.
I tend to go toward like, I don't know, like, I don't want to say like hard-hitting contemporary, but kinda, cause like,
I was trying to think of some of the
I mentioned it in the first episode, but like growing up I read a lot of Ellen Hopkins because her books were about like kind of like dark stuff, and so I would read those.
Like now I've been big for the contemporary, well, and
but yeah, I love historical fiction, but like with historical fiction, I have to be in a certain mood for it, and I have, like, I don't know, like, I always tell people when they want to get into historical fiction, think of, like, the time in history you want to read about. Because, like, I like to read about the Tudor time era and stuff, especially lately. But, like, there's so much about, like, World War II or, like, the 20s or whatever. Yeah. And so if you find, like, a period in history that you like, then that's what you should read in historical fiction.
Well, and, like, for now, usually January, February, I'm in the mood for World War II Holocaust, because that's when we teach our stuff about that. And
I'm almost never in the mood for that because I don't like being sad.
And I know, and that's what's crazy, you know, it's just, I love history. I took a World War II class in college and all that, and it's just a time period that
I love what I love about history. I love the sociology of history. Like, I love how, like, the historical events, so that's why I like historical fiction so much, is because a lot of times it's about either a fictional character or even a real character, and it's about how they reacted to the events that are happening outside, like, in their
And
time.
see, I also like learning, I love historical fiction a lot because I love learning about different cultures. And so, like, I was a cultural geography minor in college, and like, I just finished, it's been on my bookshelf for years, but the beginning of the month, I finished, like, the Poisonwood Bible, which deals with the Congo and stuff, and, you know, and that was really interesting, like, from the female point of view, and it was just, like, it was a hard, like, it was a dense book, but I was like, I'm glad I read it, because it gave me a piece of that, like, time period in that country, and even though it was from, like, American, like, Southern Baptist missionaries, which, I mean, it's, like, I would like to see what, like, I'll also pull books that were written by, like, someone from that country. So that's probably what I'll do next, is find something from that time period, whether it's a nonfiction book or something, to learn about that, because, that was just someone's interpretation of it. And so that's why I kind of find it interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, like, I know, like, Vietnam, that whole era, I want to learn more about.
I need to learn more about that. It's so funny because, like, with history, Cody really likes history too, but he's ex-military, and so he's very into, like, the wars and stuff, and so it's so much fun to, like, watch history stuff with him, because, like, usually he'll know about the war, but I'll know, like, oh, well, so and so was in power at this time, so that's why, like, they really wanted to do blah blah blah, so this is why, like, this war happened, whereas he's like, oh, well, then this affects that. I love, and I mean, that's how it is kind of with my brothers, because like, one was military, but the other one, we all, and I think it was because of my brothers that I got, and I love travel, I love learning about cultures and geography, but then with them being, I mean, on family vacations, we would have to watch Saving Private Ryan on our trips, because I was the outvoted one, so we always, and, like, on weekends, it was the military channel or any of that type of stuff. So, like, I grew up with that, but then we would also watch the travel channel. So it's like, I think they really influenced it, and then having my grandfather fight. I was about to say, like, I feel like I'm like an old man because literally, like, my grandfathers would always have the History Channel. Like, I distinctly remember going over to my grandparents' house and they would have the History Channel on.
Well,
and, like,
that's my brothers would have
I'm that person. Like, literally, I was talking about this in a vlog I posted recently. I think it was the Camp Nano Week 1 vlog. Because, like, literally when I'm writing, I watch documentaries. Like, that's all I do. But also, I was gonna say, like, so as we've already covered, I'm, like, really into, like, the fantasy, but I love finding little things that like, are a metaphor for, like, our real world. Like, for example, Harry Potter, like, Lupin being a metaphor for AIDS. And, like, I remember when that was, like, a big news story, and I was like, did none of y'all get that? Like, I don't know. Because that's something that I, like, love, like, I don't know, I've known that forever. Of course, Harry Potter was my life from age 12 to 15, so.
I would say longer than that.
Well, yeah, but, like, you don't even know. It was bad.
Well, I'm, like, seeing, like, how, and that's, like, the thing, is, like, seeing how it connects back to actual society.
And, like, I love, and here lately I've been, and I feel like so many people say that, like, oh, so many fantasies are inspired by the Tudors, blah, 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 which I guess is true. But I still like that. Like, I mean, the Tudor time era is still fascinating. It's so fascinating. And there's so many things that just happened and that were okay. For example, we were watching something, I can't remember what it was, but in that we were watching, I told, like, one of the things that Henry VIII did, he was one of the first ones to make it illegal to, or not illegal, but to make it legal to execute an insane person.
Right.
And so, yeah, like, the thing like that, like, you would never think that, like, that came from that time era.
Well, I mean, even just, and I bring it up, and my students get fascinated. I'm like, yeah, like, Henry VIII created his own religion to divorce his wife.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's,
it's
like,
just crazy
huge
things that happen. But also, like, Before I Darken by Kirsten White is a retelling of Vlad the Impaler if Vlad was a woman. But, like, that whole series has so much about, like, the Ottoman Empire and things like that, which is just so interesting. And then The City of Brass, I cannot remember who it's by, but it's like an adult fantasy.
Yes.
And that is about a lot of like Muslim cultures, which is just so interesting. And I just love it. I love like seeing the different things. And then there's also this new fantasy book out called The Women's War, which is apparently a commentary about like the whole Me Too movement. And I cannot wait to read it. And I'm just so excited. So,
like, there's a lot of times I wish I was that creative and like could take current
like
issues
in some of my
like,
books, I'll like some of the like stuff I write, I'll be like I'll like be writing something, I'm like, oh wait, that's a good metaphor for blah blah blah. It's so much fun. You do feel like a genius.
Yeah. So that's kind of about it. Like, about
I
with
feel
our
like
reading
that's a good introduction to our reading taste.
And I mean, we are very different. Like, we are so different when it comes to what we like, but there's a few where we overlap, like anything dealing with the Tudors, any of those retellings, because like Curse So Dark and Lonely,
sometimes I can get her into some supernatural stuff. Like, she watched Bitten with me, but she never read the book.
I read like the first like 2-3 chapters. I mean, it's on my TBR, so we will see.
We should really do an adaptations episode, because there is so much. Or even just like stuff that like, I guess adaptations.
Yeah, because with Heartless, and then I love the Cinder series, so that's where.
And see, and I don't, because it's a lot of, like, it's not a lot of sci-fi, it's like sci-fi light, but it's still just too much sci-fi for me.
Well, and I know like a lot of my I think one reason, not only having you, but reading books to suggest to my students, that has been big, because I've been able to suggest the Cinder series, and you know, oh, I forget, there's another one. Like, a lot of, and this is going into like how we're gonna probably end, but I'm currently reading 5 Feet Apart. So a lot of my students, like, they, you know, saw the movie, and I was like, no, you cannot tell me. I said, and I've heard that it ends differently, but I was like, I try to read things that they would, you know, and so like they may have seen the movie or something. I'm like, no, you should read the book because of such and such, you know. So I do that, but yeah, we'll definitely get into more with different things.
Sure.
And if you have any suggestions on what you want us to talk about,
let us know.
Leave below. But I know, like I said, I'm currently,
or either if you're listening to this on iTunes, we'll post a picture on Instagram, so let us know there. If you're watching this on YouTube, just let us know in the comments below. But yeah, I guess we can end with what we're currently reading. I am still reading Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan, but it's perfect for me because it is a dark fantasy. Apparently there's some romance in it. I haven't gotten to the romance part, but it also involves like blood magic, which is super interesting. It's also kind of inspired by like Russian society, which is super interesting and right up my alley. So yeah, I am enjoying it so far.
I was gonna say, and I'm currently, like I said, 5 Feet Apart, which deals with cystic fibrosis, and I'm about halfway through. I'll finish it today. And then I'm also listening to, because of I've talked about it before with audiobooks, I have a long drive to work, and so I'm listening to My Plain Jane, and I'm not liking it as much as I liked the first one.
That's a bummer.
But the reason is, like, I think the narration's fine and all that, but I was never a huge Jane Eyre fan. And I think that goes back to the whole supernatural thing, because it involves ghosts.
It does kind of.
And so, just thinking over it now, it's because it's the ghost. It's a supernatural aspect.
I actually have not read the full Jane Eyre. That's on my list. I really want to read it.
Because, like, the whole ghost. And I didn't mind the book, but it wasn't one of my favorite. And I like classics. That's one weird thing about me, but I guess it's not weird, but I do like classics. And
see, I used to read like the great illustrated classics. That's just another thing, like from when I was a kid. I loved those. And so like I think I read that Jane Eyre. But a lot, so a lot of the classics, like I know the full story, but I just read it as like a kid in a kid adapted format. So I don't know. Do you count that as reading the classic? Not really.
I wouldn't count it.
Yeah, like it's
because it's a different version.
Yeah, but like I still know the stories.
Yeah.
Will I ever read the full version? Probably not. Let's just be honest.
As I would say, you'll just read all the retellings.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, definitely leave us a review wherever you are listening to this, or subscribe and thumbs up, all that good stuff. It really helps us out, especially as a new podcast. So yeah, we'll see you next week with another episode. Bye.